The biggest thing that prevents us from being feminine is the fear of being ourselves. You look at all the things you guys talked about, right? Someone even brought up vulnerability. The fear of being vulnerable, the fear that if I'm soft and delicate, society will fucking stomp on me. The fear of if I am like myself and I'm gentle and loving and kind, I won't get a promotion at work because I'm not as ruthless as those motherfuckers. The fear that if I'm soft and kind as a single mother, that life will shit on me. Why? Because stories through like all of the history books, through my grandparents, through like everybody says, there's no space for someone who's soft around here. You know, all of these stories, all of this conditioning, all of this experience, bit by bit by bit, in our workplaces, in our lives, in our spaces, in our conditioning, all of it leads us to be afraid of ourselves. That's the craziest thing. And so we think we need to be something else in order to survive. Think about that. This is not a surface level statement. I want you to reel this back in. The biggest thing that prevents us from being feminine is the fear of being ourselves. I have worked with thousands of women now. And in each time, I always come to the same, like almost the same conclusion, that when they first come to me, they have such a tough like shell. They want to fight me because they think by me trying to dismantle their masculine conditioning, I'm trying to bully them. Why? Because that's what society's done. And they don't think that if I were to pull out that masculine shell, that there's something beautiful, like this beautiful flower within. Why? Because no one's validated how beautiful that fucking flower is. Everyone has said a flower is not delicate, it's fragile. There's a difference between the two, by the way, between being delicate and being fragile. There's power in being delicate, but fragile comes across as being weak, comes across as like, I can break at any moment. You take this a step further. If you have a wounded masculine, and I did this, how many of you got to watch the live call that I did on Instagram, but I posted in the Facebook group about how a wounded masculine can create a masculine female? Raise your hands if you got to watch that. Okay, cool. If you haven't, it's on the Facebook group. Go back and watch it. I'm going to repeat my statement. How a wounded masculine, so a wounded male, a male not in his own strong, healthy masculine, how he can create a female who starts to create a masculine exterior. So how a wounded man can make a masculine woman. And I'll explain this to you right now very briefly. I don't want to use this whole topic this time for this topic because there's already a video for this. If a man, so take this point, right? So you're born a flower, and even men, all the men who are listening out there, half of you was born a flower, by the way. And that half of you is your emotional side. The side of you that wants to like connect, wants to hug, wants to kiss, wants to love, wants to hold, like, you know, other little people, wants to go up to a puppy and not be afraid of judgment, wants to pick a child and not be afraid of like, oh my God, someone's going to say like, this guy has like, you know, he's so weak and blah, blah, blah. Part of you, the part of you that wants to cry, all of this, right? So this part exists within you as well. So this conversation is not just for the women, by the way. This conversation is for all of us. So now you're born with this flower, this beautiful flower that like wants to show itself, very like delicate. Now, this flower, when it's delicate, you think about the rose, which is amongst the most beautiful of flowers, right? You know how the rose plant exists in both masculinity and femininity? It's fairly obvious. Can anybody think about it? The thorn is the masculine and the rose is the feminine. So when you look at that beautiful flower whose petals are so fragile, if you were to pluck it or to like pull it out, it's protected. What does that allow the rose to do? It allows the rose to thrive. When you have animals that brush past the plant, when you have people that push past it or whatever, the thorns protect it. And the thorns look ugly. We hate thorns. We're like, yuck, what the fuck is this? Like, goddamn thorn when we're going for a rose. So we don't value it. But the thorn doesn't think about itself and be like, oh no, I'm hideous. The thorn knows it serves its purpose, and its purpose is to protect the rose. So what really, and I'm going to break this into two parts, this discussion piece. What creates and allows the feminine to thrive is if there's a strong masculine in its life growing up that allows it to feel safe, that allows it to feel expressive, that allows it to flow, that allows it to feel creative, that allows it to thrive without trying to condition it to what that masculine thinks it's supposed to have. A strong masculine man especially as a father, is what creates a beautiful feminine daughter. People who don't fully understand the concept of masculine and feminine energy, they'll be like, oh no, only a mother is what depicts the daughter. No, the mother is what allows like that gentle surrounding of saying, here, mimic some of these ideologies, some of these belief systems, sure. But what actually allows the femininity to thrive is the opposite sex. And I put out this post once in, I think this was last year before last, where I talked about, and I said, what really hits our attachment wounds the strongest is our wound with the opposite sex parent. And, as usual, I will just let you know on my posts, when someone doesn't agree with something, they're more than happy to project their own insecurity about it. And people are like, oh no, you can't talk about my opposite sex parent like that. This wasn't true, that wasn't true. But we don't listen to the truth deep enough. Just because you had a father who was at home all the time doesn't necessarily mean it was a father who exemplified strong masculine energy. A father who exemplifies strong masculine energy is a father who allows his daughter to feel safe, to be loved, to be trusted, to be protected, to know that if she was to step out into the outside world, she would be taken care of if anything were to happen. He is the one who provides his boys to say, you've got this beautiful girl in this house. It is partly your responsibility to allow her femininity to thrive by us creating this safe space for her. So a father who, on the opposite, starts to shame the daughter, who is emotionally unavailable for the daughter. So if the thorns decide to fall off the rose plant and said, you know what, we're going for a fucking walk, we're not here today, the rose is going to be under threat. It's going to be under danger. So an emotionally unavailable father to a girl child or to a daughter or even to a boy suppresses the feminine development within that child. Now, fast forward way into the future. I want to tell you guys how the belief system just revalidates itself. It's what we call confirmation bias. It's a psychological principle. You can Google it. It's probably one of the most ultimate belief systems that we have, which is that what I believe, I will want to make true. That's how powerful the brain is. So if you believe you're not good looking, you will find things all around you to validate that you're not good looking. If you believe you are good looking, you will find things all around you to validate that you are good looking. No matter how you actually look, it's what you believe and what you think. So belief system, if you guys attended the abundance and scarcity call, you would have seen that a belief system is actually what creates abundance. So now fast forward, right? Fast forward all these years where if the feminine is not used to having a safe, healthy masculine as a strong identity in its life, what do you think is going to happen when it wants a partner? It's not going to know what to attract. It's not going to know how to attract a safe and healthy supportive masculine energy. So what does it attract? It attracts a wounded masculine, or maybe a toxic masculine, a hyper-developed masculine, or maybe an overly developed feminine within the masculine. It can attract any of those things because it doesn't have a strong identity of what a good masculine energy is. And so now this comes back to that exact point where as a woman now, or maybe as a man with like feminine energy, I attract someone who I just cannot trust. And you cannot trust because you've suppressed the feminine energy, which is basically trust and intuition. You cannot trust because you haven't given yourself access to it your whole life. So if it's like saying, if you haven't drunk, if you hadn't had a sip of water your whole life, and you've only been drinking Coke, if I were to give you water right now, you'd be like, oh God, this sucks. Give me that poison that I'm used to. But you think that poison is so normal, right? Because that's what you're used to. So you go back to the Coke or whatever else. So the point is, if you have not ever accessed your trust, the moment it comes into your life, you're like, what is this intuition thing? Like this thing is like, no, it's not for me. I just want to follow the principles, the books, the doctrines, the orthodox stuff, the rules, the regulations, the way it's supposed to be, the structure. So you will attract someone in your life who you do not trust because you don't know how to trust. And you know what they will do? They will just prove to you that you can't trust them. And that has nothing to do with them. By the way, for those of you who've gone through the gauntlet, you already know this. I would hope that you don't need me to teach you this lesson again. But as in the gauntlet, we break down, just to let you guys know, we break down everything to know what is it and who am I based on what I'm attracting. So I'm going to give you guys little snippets of that. And that's the fact that if I don't believe that I'm worthy of trust, because I've never really known what trust was, if I don't believe that I'm worthy of protection, if I don't believe that I can have someone who shows up for me, if I don't believe that I have someone who can show up for themselves, then what am I going to attract? The opposite of that. I'm going to attract, even as a single mother, a man who can't commit to me, A man who can't really show up and support me because all I know is that I have to control my environment, that I am the only one I can trust. I am the only one who can do things this way. So by stepping into that control, what you're actually stepping into is a wounded masculine. Now, let me take to, like I said, fast forward all these years, where if you have a wounded masculine, you have a man who's somewhat abusive, like perhaps a father figure that you may have had, right? Someone who not only was maybe emotionally absent, but was possibly an alcoholic, didn't know how to work through their own childhood trauma, was abusive to people in and around you, not only to you necessarily, could have just been abusive to people around you in that environment. Then you start to see the wounded masculine as the only masculine that exists. 30 years later, you attract a man like that into your life. Now, a wounded masculine, when it looks at the feminine, is intimidated because it looks at the feminine and it doesn't know how to protect it. It doesn't know how to keep it safe. So instead, what it does is think of a thorn that starts attacking a rose. That's exactly what happens. But your belief system as a rose says, the only kind of men I can have are the thorns that attack me. And so now you have an abusive man, you have a man who can't show up, a man who doesn't want to take responsibility or accountability for his actions, a man who doesn't want to provide, a man who doesn't want to lead, to direct, a man who's not confident. All of these things are a wounded male, right? A wounded man. And through various ways of either abuse, of neglect, of emotional avoidance, any of those things, by all of those ways, what do you think he does to the rose? It tries to toughen up the rose, right? Because if a rose feels that the very thorn that it's supposed to be with is going to attack it, what do you think the rose will do? It'll build up a force field. It'll close itself. It'll fold in on itself. And that is exactly what the feminine does when it's been suppressed, when it's been abused, when it's been ignored, when it's been invalidated, is it starts to fold in on itself to become this masculine version, which is what every one of y'all brought up. It's afraid to be vulnerable. It's afraid to open up because it's afraid it's going to be attacked, right? It's afraid that life will work out. Why? Because the thorn is always getting at it. It's afraid that, it will be protected because the thorn is not doing its job anymore. So the rose has to protect itself. The rose has to pay the bills. The rose has to go out and work the 9-to-5 job. The rose has to be the father and the mother. The rose has to be angry sometimes, tough, determinate. But in all that process, in that whole thing, the value of the rose has been completely forgotten. Wouldn't you agree? It's not a rose anymore. Now it's just a new species of plant that we're still trying to figure out what it really is. Is it beautiful? I don't really know. But I know it can be aggressive. I know it can be these things. So it's about that survival. And survival is based on what? Fear. Fear of not surviving. Hey, and welcome to the Inner Yats YouTube page. If you like our content, make sure you click the like and the subscribe button so that you get more of these amazing videos that keep coming your way.